Have you ever heard of a masterpiece that was born not from a flash of inspiration, but from a profound feeling of, well, failure? Today, we're diving into the incredible origin story of a world-renowned spiritual text, the Śrīmad Bhagavatam. And it all starts with its legendary author finishing his life's work only to feel totally and utterly empty. I mean, just think about that for a second, because it really gets at a deep human truth. Imagine pouring your entire soul into a project for the good of all humanity, creating a true legacy, and then at the absolute peak of your success, you just feel hollow inside. That is exactly where our story begins. So, the story opens in this sacred forest where a huge assembly of great sages has gathered. They've been at it for 1,000 years, performing this major ritual, but now they have these really urgent questions. It's like a grand cosmic inquiry that's about to set our entire narrative in motion. They are desperate to hear the story of a great emperor. They're asking, who was this guy? Why would a king this powerful just abandon his entire empire to fast to death on the banks of a sacred river? And what was that final world-changing conversation he had with a great mystic in his last days? They are literally pleading for someone to tell them this story. Now, the one person who holds the key to all of this is a legendary sage. But here's the twist. He isn't just a character in the story. He's the author of the whole thing, a man with a truly unique perspective on time itself. His name is Vyasa, and he was born at this really critical turning point in cosmic history. He was gifted with this extraordinary ability. He could see the past, the present, and the future all at once. And you know what? The future he saw for humanity was not a pretty picture. With his divine vision, Vyasa foresaw a coming dark age, what's known as the Kali Yuga. He saw a time where the very fabric of human virtue would just start to unravel, a sharp decline in humanity's spiritual potential. He saw that people would become faithless, that their inner energy would be totally depleted. He saw them becoming dull-witted, living shorter lives, and just generally being, well, unfortunate. Realizing that future generations wouldn't be able to grasp this deep spiritual knowledge, he knew he had to do something. He had to create a kind of lifeboat for timeless wisdom. So what does he do? Vyasa embarks on one of the most ambitious literary projects in human history, and his goal was so compassionate and clear: to preserve and organize all sacred knowledge for the struggling people of the future. He had a step-by-step plan. First, he took the original, singular Veda, and he methodically broke it down into 4 parts to make it easier to study. But he knew that even that would be way too complex for most people. So he went even further. He composed a 5th Veda, the epic history we know as the Mahābhārata. And this, right here, this shows you the genius of his compassion. The 4 Vedas were complex, really only accessible to the most learned scholars. But the Mahābhārata, that was designed for everyone else, for women, for laborers, for anyone who couldn't do that formal study. He took the highest truths and embedded them in these amazing stories and histories, making wisdom something everyone could access. And the scale of this thing is just mind-blowing. Over 100,000 verses. It's a colossal library of philosophy, history, and guidance for all of humanity, all put together by one person. You would think, right, that after finishing this magnum opus, he would feel this profound sense of peace and accomplishment. But that's not what happened. Not even close. In fact, it was the exact opposite. After completing this monumental work for the benefit of all beings, Vyasa found himself in this state of deep, unexplainable dissatisfaction. The very thing that should have been his crowning achievement left him feeling totally hollow. And this brings us to the core mystery of our story. I mean, he had done everything right. He followed all the rules, he honored his teachers, he created a timeless gift for the world. So the big question is, why on earth did he feel so empty? Listen to his own words. This is his own inner turmoil. He knew that externally he had it all. He was, quote, full in all respects. And yet deep down, his soul felt this void, a sense that something absolutely essential was still missing from his great work. So you have this image of him retreating to his hermitage, just sitting alone on the bank of the sacred Saraswati River, turning this problem over and over in his mind, trying to figure out the source of his own spiritual discontent. And it's right here, at his absolute lowest point, confused and dejected after his greatest triumph, that the story takes its pivotal turn. A solution was quite literally about to walk into his life. So as he's sitting there, totally lost in these heavy thoughts, a radiant figure just unexpectedly arrives at his hermitage, smiling. And it was the celestial sage, Narada. Now, this is not just any visitor. This is a cosmic traveler, a divine musician, and a spiritual master. His arrival is a sign that the answer to Vyasa's problem isn't something you can find through more work or more knowledge, but through a totally different kind of wisdom. And that leads us to the final amazing question, right? Vyasa had already compiled all the world's knowledge. What could Narada possibly add to that? Well, the answer, the essential ingredient missing from all of Vyasa's work, wasn't more rules or rituals. It was the intimate, personal stories of the divine, stories of love, devotion, and play. And filling that void is the very reason the Śrīmad Bhagavatam was born.
So today we're doing a deep dive into what might be one of the most crucial conversations in ancient literature.
It really is. We're looking at the conversation that launched a monumental text.
Exactly. We're not just starting a story. We're basically sitting in on the meeting where the whole roadmap for the Bhagavatam was established.
That's a great way to put it. Our sources take us right there, to the sages in the Naiman Aryan forest. And their leader, Śrīmad, he goes up to Sutta the storyteller with, well, a whole stack of urgent questions.
And these aren't just, casual questions. They're the fundamental mysteries that the entire narrative has to solve.
They're the why, the who, and the how of the whole story that's about to unfold.
It's fascinating how high the stakes are right from the get-go. Śrīmad's questions really show that this whole text is built around three incredible enigmas. Let's lay that roadmap out for you.
And the first one, it's a real crisis. The first mystery is all about the king. A young king, Parikshit, the son of Abhimanyu, and Śrīmad asks, why did this king, a powerful king at the absolute peak of his reign, suddenly just abandon his kingdom?
Abandon everything.
Everything. He goes to the bank of the Ganges and he decides to fast unto death, a kind of voluntary, ritualistic ending of his life.
Wow. I mean, that is a shocking premise for a sacred text. A king choosing death over his duty. It just flies in the face of what you'd expect from a great ruler. It signals that something massive must be happening in the world.
It really does. It immediately establishes that the stakes aren't just political or social.
They're existential.
Exactly. The king's choice is the catalyst for everything.
Okay, so that's mystery number one. What about number two? This is the messenger, the sage Sukha.
Ah, yes. Shuka, he's this incredible paradox.
How so?
Well, the sources call him a great yogi, totally realized, but he wanders around looking like someone who's, completely mad or mute or just inert.
So he's the ultimate enigma of detachment. He's fully present and enlightened, but he just ignores all social norms.
Totally. And Śrīmad points this out. He says, Sukha is samadok. He's completely equipoised. He sees everyone and everything with the same sort of pure, isolated vision.
And this is where we get that incredible anecdote, right, from verse 5. It's one of those moments that just perfectly shows the difference between knowing something intellectually and true spiritual liberation.
It's a standout detail for sure.
Yeah.
The story goes that Sukha and his father, the great sage Vyasa, are walking past a pool. And in the pool, some goddesses are bathing, nude.
Okay.
When they see Vyasa, the father, approach, they immediately cover themselves. But when Sukha, the son, walks past, and they're both nude, by the way, the goddesses don't bother.
That's amazing. I mean, Vyasa is the compiler of all knowledge, the greatest sage. And yet, they see a difference between him and his son. So what was their explanation?
They explained that Sukha, because of his pure vision, his vivikdagdona, he just didn't perceive any distinction between male and female. He only saw the spirit, the essence underneath. He was so detached from the material world that his consciousness just didn't register their physical form as something to react to.
But his father did, the great Vyasa.
Even him. For all his wisdom, they saw that he still carried just enough of that material perception to make them feel they should cover up. He was still relating to the world through a structured mind. Shuka was operating from pure, liberated consciousness.
And that tells you everything about the kind of person who is going to be answering the king's desperate questions later on.
It really does.
Okay, so we have the king's death fast, the paradoxical messenger, and that brings us to the third mystery, the origin of the text itself. How did this whole thing get written in the first place?
Sutta begins to answer that by setting the scene. This all happens at a really pivotal time. The transition between two ages, the Dvapara Yuga and the Kali Yuga.
The changing of an era.
A huge one. And Vyasa is sitting alone on the banks of the Sarasvati River. He's just finished his purifications, and he's using his divine sight, his Divyana Katla, to look into the future.
So he's not just observing his own time, he's doing a full scan of what's to come for humanity.
He is. And what he sees is, well, it's deeply troubling. He sees time speeding up, becoming overwhelming, and because of that, he foresees this massive degeneration in the human condition.
What specifically was he so worried about? What did he see that made him think he needed to compile all these new texts?
He saw a degradation across the board. People would become faithless, ashanavatanan, they'd be weak, nisatban, dull-witted, and short-lived.
And you mentioned the dullness of intellect was maybe the biggest problem.
I think so. He realized that the sheer complexity and, the huge breadth of the existing Vedic knowledge, it would be completely inaccessible. The minds of future generations just wouldn't have the capacity for it.
So his first move is a practical one. It's about preservation, almost like an administrative solution to a coming spiritual crisis.
It's the ultimate act of intellectual triage. To make sure the Vedic rituals and knowledge survived, he took the one single massive Veda and he divided it into 4 manageable parts: the Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva.
A monumental task.
It's unbelievable, just to ensure society and spiritual practice could continue.
But even that wasn't enough for him, was it? He knew that even dividing the Vedas would still leave huge parts of the population out.
Precisely. And this is where his deep compassion, his character as Kapatavatsala, the friend of the distressed, really shines. He then compiled all the ancient stories and histories, the Itihasa and Purāṇas.
And he calls them the 5th Veda.
He does. It's like a workaround, a way to democratize access to this wisdom.
Who was it for specifically?
It was revolutionary, really. The main 3 Vedas were traditionally not accessible. They were not, quote, within the range of hearing for women, for people classified as sutras, and for a group called Vijabantus, who were sort of friends of the twice-born but lacked the qualifications.
So he creates the Mahābhārata.
Yes, the great history. He creates it specifically so these excluded groups could still learn about Dharma, about righteous living, and achieve spiritual benefit.
Okay, let's pause on that for a second. He masters all knowledge, he sees the future, he partitions the entire Vedic canon to preserve it, and then he writes the world's longest epic poem out of pure compassion.
By any measure, it's a life of unparalleled spiritual and intellectual success.
Which is what makes what happens next so shocking and so human.
It's the critical turning point, because despite doing all of this, despite being this master architect of cosmic knowledge, the source tells us Vyasa's heart was still profoundly unsatisfied.
He felt incomplete.
Deeply incomplete.
How is that even possible? If you've just solved all the world's major knowledge transfer problems, what's missing? Where's the gap?
He's sitting there by the river, and he's doing this intense introspection, just pondering his own emptiness. The text says he felt kilam atmanama void, an incompleteness in his very self.
So he turns that same divine sight inward. He analyzes his own failure. And what does he conclude? What was the missing piece?
He starts to self-correct his entire life's work. He wonders if, in his focus on structuring knowledge and providing the moral framework of Dharma, he'd neglected the deepest spiritual core.
So he'd written the instruction manual.
Right.
But maybe not provided the motivation.
Yeah.
Or the spirit behind it.
Exactly. He realizes he had not properly presented the Bhagavata Dharmas, the purely devotional principles. He'd emphasized ritual, righteous action, which are vital, but he hadn't focused enough on that profound, loving connection to the divine.
That is a powerful realization. The structural framework for society, the Vedas, the Mahābhārata, that was done. But the emotional, the relational, the devotional framework for the individual soul, that was weak.
He'd built this great house, but he forgot to put the heart inside it. And that absence, that lack of focus on the heart, was why the builder himself felt empty.
The structure alone couldn't bring peace.
It needs the essence of devotion.
And it's right at this moment of profound self-doubt and lamentation, the catalyst arrives.
The timing is perfect. While Vyasa is sitting there, feeling totally incomplete, the divine sage Nārada Muni shows up at his ajrama.
And Narada is the perfect person for this job.
The perfect guide. He's famous for his constant devotion, revered by the gods. He is the living embodiment of the very thing Vyasa just realized was missing. And Vyasa immediately recognizes this. and honors him.
What a beautiful setup. We started this deep dive with Shaunaka asking 3 massive questions. Why did the king choose death? Who is this mad, liberated messenger? And how was this monumental text created?
And Susa's answer begins not with the events themselves, but with the necessary emotional failure of the creator. Vyasa had to reach the end of his intellectual road.
He had to finish dividing the Vedas, finish writing the epic.
Right. Before he could realize that pure intellectual structure and morality just weren't enough.
The ultimate goal wasn't just to organize the world, but to find inner fulfillment. And that required this devotional element, the Bhagavata dharmas, that he'd sort of sidelined before. His own dissatisfaction becomes the genesis for the very story that will answer all the other questions.
And I think this is the key insight you can draw from these sources. Vyasa had encyclopedic knowledge. He was the ultimate organizer of reality. But he still felt that emptiness, that hilam atmanam.
So if mastering all the facts and all the moral laws doesn't automatically lead to inner peace, what does that imply for us, for you, the listener, in your own search for understanding?
Well, we spend so much of our time gathering knowledge, imposing structure on things, just like Vyasa dividing the Vedas. The lesson here seems to be that those efforts, whether they're academic or professional or personal, they might just need an underlying element of heart, of that emotional or spiritual context, to truly make us feel complete. Otherwise, we risk becoming masters of all this knowledge who still feel fundamentally unfinished.